Welcome to Club E. Hi, I'm Rick Brimacombe of Brimacombe and Associates. I am your architect of business growth. I will work with you to unlock your potential and amplify the scale of your company. Today, we're going to be talking about Julie's new book and podcast release, Poised for Exit. Want to thank our sponsors, Irish Titan, a web development and e-commerce firm, Boulay Group, CPAs and advisors, Highland Bank, a family-owned local community bank, Romaine Berg, a digital strategy agency, Minnesota Sales, a sales acceleration firm, and the Network Connect, a catalytic gateway for growing your company. But first, before we get to that, I'd like you to subscribe and like our Club E channel. We need your help, so take a moment here, give a little bit to us and to yourself. Take a moment, and I'm going to hold on. You hit like and subscribe, and what that will allow us to do is to deliver better content to you, our wonderful audience. All right. Again, like and subscribe. All right. With that, I want to introduce today's speaker, Julie Keys, founder of Keys Strategies, and now author and podcast producer. Welcome, Julie.
Thanks, Rick. It's good to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you. Julie and I have been friends and business associates on a number of different projects over the years. So it's fun to have you, and I appreciate you joining us, Julie.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to all of your wonderful questions.
Or not so wonderful, depending on how things go.
We'll figure it out.
All right. Yes, we will figure it out. So Julie's contact info is julie@keystrategies.com. That's in the comment field. So again, you can get her email address there. In addition, you will also get an opportunity to submit some questions. And I'll tell you about that in a moment. All right. So Julie, tell us a little bit about yourself, your firm, the various things that you're up to, and some of your activities.
Sounds good. Well, hi, everybody. Great to be here. I am a fellow Minnesotan well, most of you are from Minnesota, not everybody, but lived in the Twin Cities area all of my life. And I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs. So I'd have to say probably at least 2 generations back, if not 3 on both sides, were people who owned their own business. And so when I was raised in a family of entrepreneurs, it kind of naturally occurred, right? It was in my blood, if you will. And so over the course of 23 years, I owned and operated several companies with my husband, and then became a consultant in 2011, and officially, made it legal, right? Filed with the Secretary of State and things like that in 2012, and incorporated the company. Right now, my husband and I, my second husband, blended family. We have 8 children between us, 7 grandkids, and 2 more grandkids on the way. So we're excited about that. And so I own a company called Keys Strategies, like Rick said. I work with small business owners, privately held companies, help them grow, improve, and get their businesses ready for exit, whenever that exit is going to be, whether it's internal or external. So you could say that I specialize in exit planning, which is what the book is about. Some of the things I like to do, I'm a big outdoors person. So even in the winter, in spring and summer, I like to do a lot of cycling and hiking. And then in the winter, we do a lot of snowshoeing, and just like to be outside, like water sports and things like that. So as far as Key Strategies goes, like I said, exit planning is our specialty. And with the Exit Planning Institute, I was able to acquire the credential of CEPA, and that was in 2015. And so since 2015, I incorporated that business consulting, strategic planning, and implementation alongside and with the exit planning practice. And it goes really well with exit planning, because many times in the process of getting ready for a transition, a business owner discovers that they're really not ready. Their business isn't ready, and they're not ready. And so preparedness is huge. Having and building a transferable asset. Otherwise, there really isn't a very good outcome. So I'm honored to also say that I'm a faculty member for the Exit Planning Institute, and run the chapter here in the Twin Cities, launched it in 2016. Rick and I have done some really great events together with our organizations, and I think they complement each other very well. So that's me in a nutshell.
All right. Well, again, thank you very much for joining us. So I have to ask, you have all the kids, all the grandkids, you got your business. Um, uh, do you find time to relax at all? Or maybe do you have a bunch of pets as well? Or how else do you fill up your time?
Yeah, no pets. Um, just traveling around and seeing our kids and spending time with the grandkids whenever we can, and work. And
Yeah.
that's pretty much my life. And
Yeah.
I love it. I have a great life.
Yep. Yeah. The snowshoeing sounds fun as well. All
Hmm.
right. So before we get to our event, I want to discuss what you, the audience, can receive for your participation. First of all, you can put in your questions into the comment field, as well as our hashtag today is going to be poised for exit. Hashtag poised for exit. And that will give you an opportunity to win one of Julie's new books. She'll tell you about the book in a moment. Again, hashtag poised for exit, and you'll go into a drawing for up to 5 of Julie's books. So 5 of you out there can get a signed copy of Julie's new book. All right. So Julie, tell us a little bit about the book, your inspiration. What was behind it?
Well, I have to say that it was a project that I've had on my own strategic plan for at least 5 years, maybe longer. I literally started writing a book 10 years ago, but it was a different book and different subject matter. It was more personal than professionally based. And so that one never got finished. Maybe someday it will. When you go through a life change, sometimes that just kind of, you table those projects, but then maybe bring it back later on. This particular book, I had in my plan for a long time, like I said, but I knew that I needed to really expand my knowledge and expertise in exit planning before I actually wrote a book about it. So when I became certified was when I decided I want to write a book about this. It's not time yet. I need to gather my intellectual property and my stories before I can actually write a book about it. And I got to learn some stuff. And so that's how this came about. And I also tell my own story in the book. That was another inspiration for being able to, write this book. And I did focus on women. A lot of people ask me, why did you focus on a book for women? And truthfully, the book isn't meant just for women. It's meant for women and men. It doesn't really matter. The process of exit planning isn't any different for a man than it is for a woman. It's just that women, because I've lived through it, have a little bit of a different experience. And in my research, I couldn't find anything that anyone had ever written for women entrepreneurs when it came to exit planning. But yet, there are 11 million women owned businesses in the United States and $1.7 trillion in revenue. So that's pretty dang significant. And so I thought, why not? I'll write something that is focused on my sister women entrepreneurs, and men will learn something from it too. But that was my inspiration.
All right, great. Well, look forward to sharing that with the audience, and we can do that 2 ways. Again, hashtag poised for exit, and you can get into a drawing for a free one, as well as a link to buy it on Amazon is in the comments field as well. So tell us a little bit about the book writing process, and
Mhm.
then I'm sure it was pretty exciting to do. So tell us about that as well.
Sure. Well, I started the journey of what the book was going to be about, and how I was going to go about writing it through um, some coursework that I took through the National Speakers Association. I figured that if I wrote a book, that I probably would need to go out and talk about it, and I do like to talk, present, educate. It's a passion of mine to be able to deliver value and help people through their journey, not just one-to-one clients, but in large groups. And so I thought, well, the best way to become a better speaker is just, go directly to the source. And so went to the experts and learned some stuff. Still got a long way to go, but I did learn some things that helped me move that part forward. And then I met a partner of indie publishing. So if you know who Mark LeBlanc is, he's from the
Yeah.
Twin Cities. He's a National Speakers Association award winner, and he's also an instructor for NSA and a partner, like I said, in indie publishing. And so when I met him through this educational process, he recommended that I get to know his partner, Henry, and think about getting that book started now, and told me about some of his story and, his waiting, and that it wasn't a benefit to wait. And so I was convinced that I needed to get it started, but there's this big gray area, like, okay, well, this is a huge project. How in the world am I ever going to get this started? Right. So then I talked to Henry DeVries, who is his partner. He's in San Diego. He's the CEO of Indie Publishing. And we had a book chat, and he invited me to attend a workshop that he was conducting in Las Vegas. That was in January or so of 2019. So I went to this 3-day workshop immersion in writing a book. And out of that workshop came a pretty detailed outline of what the book was going to be about. And so through that process and working with Henry, hiring Indie Publishing to help me with the process, I got a book out of it. It took about a year. I couldn't have done it without their getance, but that was super fun. And they've been also instrumental in setting me up on Amazon and getting the editing done and all of that. So I honestly would have never done it without that help.
Yeah. Mark's a past speaker of Club E. Yeah, he's great.
Yeah, he is. He's really great.
All right, so you mentioned the book was written obviously from your point of view, that of a woman. You mentioned a little bit about females having different experiences. You also mentioned 11 million women-owned businesses out there. Tell us a little bit about how gender impacts the business transition process for entrepreneurs, and what are the actual differences that you experienced?
Sure. Well, the differences I think that I experienced, that I've also seen mirrored in some of my clients' experiences, is that, well, women, let's just say women are different than men. Duh. We all know that. Women tend to be more nurturing. They tend to, when it comes to their employees and their team, they tend to treat their team almost like family. There's an element of protection, kind of like the mother lion in a way. It's hard to really describe that, but it does exist. And I'm not saying that men are not concerned about their team and their employees and transferring the business and leaving it go, right? Letting your baby go. They are. It's just it's a different kind of attachment, I think. And women, unfortunately, I don't know why, but we tend to put ourselves last. And so if you are a woman entrepreneur, you're running a business, you're running a household, maybe you're even still raising kids, and maybe you have a marriage that you're trying to keep going. So you have all these things, all these hats that you wear. And the hat that almost never gets put on is the Julie hat or the Carol hat or the Marnie hat. Okay. And so when you think about, and this is through my experience with my clients, but all of a sudden a business is no longer a part of your life, then the question becomes, well, who am I without my employees, my business, my enterprise? And then identifying what it is that you really want to do with the rest of your life can be very difficult, because those dreams have kind of been, washed downstream. And getting back in touch with who that person is, aside from all of those things that she's responsible for, who is she? How does she live a fulfilling life without feeling like she has to be productive every single moment? And I think, if hopefully that helps describe, but I think that's what I've experienced myself, and that's what I've experienced with my clients. So we do need to spend time really talking about, what does that third act look like, right? What's my next act? What am I going to do with everything that I've learned, all that I've done, the impact I've had on the world? I want to continue to have impact, but how will that be different? And how can I still be fulfilled and still take care of myself? Because it's time to take care of me now.
Sounds a little bit like you could have a side hustle of being a marital counselor.
Sometimes.
And then how about the other thing that popped to mind here is We talked a little bit about before we went on the air here today about our kids, growing up and leading their own lives and stuff like that. So it sounds a little bit like the empty nest syndrome.
I would agree with that. And then if the emptiness comes with the kids leaving at the same time that the business is transferred, that's a big void. And so it's important, I think, for men and women to anticipate what that's going to be like. How will your relationships change? Your relationships with your kids moving out, that's going to change. Your relationships with your friends, with each other, seeing each other more, being home together. I mean, I think that everybody can relate to that now since we've all been quarantined. Being around people all day, every day that we don't normally see all day, every day can be really stressful. So,
And then stress is a good word. Maybe excitement might be another. As far as writing a book, I'm sure it was an emotional roller coaster, up, down, up, down. Talk a little bit about, say, the favorite part of the process of writing a book.
getting it done. That was the best part. I think during the process, reliving when I was writing the stories about the different clients, because the book is all stories. So I didn't really talk about the content of the book. I'll share that with you briefly. The book is a compilation of stories of clients of mine and and my own story. And I truly believe that people learn from hearing the stories of other people. Business owners like to hear the stories of other business owners. We're human beings are just wired for stories. That's we learn best from hearing stories, and it's entertaining too. And so when I was writing these stories, it was really fun in a way because I started coming up with like all these memories started coming up, right? I mean, I had a list, a summary of different clients that I wanted to write about. But when I really started to dissect that relationship and the time that we spent together, the things we worked on, I looked back on some of my notes because I keep those things just in case we ever get re-engaged or whatever. Um, but it was really fun to relive and to think about some of those things that occurred. Not all good things, you know. Some of the struggles that they lived through that we lived through together, and then reliving my own. You know, that wasn't a rosy picture. A lot of it wasn't, and you know, it was a struggle the whole pretty much the whole time. So it was somewhat healing to be able to write about my own story too.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, the roller coaster has ups and downs, and if your own story, same thing, ups and downs.
Yeah.
So maybe least favorite part might be too strong, but how about challenging? What was the
Mhm.
most challenging part of writing the book?
I think that editing is probably the most challenging part, and not making it a long book because that would have been way easier than making it a short book. When Henry and I talked about the content of the book and how long the book should be, he said you really don't want to make it more than 125 to 150 pages because entrepreneurs are not going to read a book that's this thick. They don't have the time. They don't take the time. So he said make it short. And he said even if you make it short, they're probably going to cut to the chase and go right to the checklists anyway, which is why I put them in there because I knew that they probably a lot of people would probably do that. I think it was Mark Twain that said that I didn't have time to write a short letter, so I wrote a long one instead. And I think it's easier to write a lot versus a little and condense. And so that was the toughest part was the editing and deciding what to keep, what to throw, um, how to how to describe the stories and situations my clients were in without making them identifiable. So I obviously changed the names. I had to change some of the details because, you know, you got to keep it confidential. And so that was a little challenging too.
Sure. Well, it's been a busy year for you, the book and now a podcast. So tell us a little bit about the podcast. What's it about? When can we check it out? And then most importantly, when do I get to be your guest?
That's a good question too. So the podcast is going to kick off next week, May 27th. Bob Sansevier is the producer of my podcast show. He produces other podcasts in the Twin Cities. And he's going to kick off by interviewing me, talking about the book, talking about the show, who's going to be on the show. So I'm kind of going to give you a highlight here on how that's going to roll out. But the show is going to align itself with the book in a way, but it's going to take a deeper dive. So the book is short and sweet, right? There's 8 or 9 chapters, a short checklist after each chapter, tools in the appendix that help the business owner to get things started. The underlying message of Poised for Exit is that you should never try to DIY your business transition. You've got to have advisors. You've got to have good advisors. You have to have advisors that will work on a team with you. There are certain things that you need to do to get ready for those relationships and for the actual transition process. And that hopefully is what the book will convey. And the podcast show, is going to just go a little deeper, a little wider, a little more holistic. To the content will be focused on business owners and how they can navigate a good, productive, fulfilling life now, and then enjoy the process and have a great outcome when it's time to transition. So all of whatever that would encompass is what my vision is for the podcast. Okay. And as far as having you on the show, I got you slated for late summer. So I'm going to throw you some zinger questions. I'll probably make you cry.
Well, I hope not. Be gentle.
I will. I'm kidding.
So you said that the purpose of the book and podcast are similar. They're kind of intertwined. They complement one another. A question I would have, and maybe some of our listeners would be, do they need to read the book before they listen to the podcast?
Well, they don't need to, but it would be helpful if they did.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So it would be helpful. Yeah.
Right.
I think you could probably read that book in an hour and a half.
Okay. So a good summer read, given that we're coming into the summer season here. And since we can't go to any restaurants or any other venues, having a little reading time at home, it's good for that.
Definitely. The book has a lot of introspective type questions that will require some thinking. So even though you can get it read in an hour, hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, because you'll probably ponder some of the questions a while before you move on. But the meat and potatoes of what's in that book will take a lot longer than that. And it's going to require help from other advisors. But I think that, to your point, when you're sitting out, on the water or on the lawn, watching the kids jump off the dock, it's a perfect time for you to just be thinking about some of those questions that you need to answer, and people that you need to get involved, and think about what are your needs and wants. When would you ideally like to be transferred out of the business? Do you want to do it phased over time, or do you just want to be done? Do you have a possibility that you could transfer internally, or is there no internal successor, whether family business or not? And does it need to be third party? Those are some basic things that you could think about right now, so that you can move forward to the next thing. Because if it's internal, that's one path. If it's external, that's another.
Yeah, and then I have some questions along the lines of exit planning and strategies, but you just tripped something in my mind. So let's just pretend there's some date out in the future. I have that date. How much time do you recommend between now and that date in terms of getting there? Is this a 1-year process, 2 years, 5 years? How long do you think people need to go through the process?
Mm-hmm. Well, if you go to exit planning school like I did, they're going to tell you that ideally you need 5 years. And if it's an internal transfer and it's going from one family member to the next, 10 years. Wow. Most owners don't start 5 years out or 10 years out, especially. They'll usually start a couple years out, and that's better than nothing, a couple years. The reason why it takes so long, though, is to prepare the business owner and to prepare the business. 2 separate distinctions, by the way, takes time. The business owner still has to keep their foot on the gas, run the company, manage the people. If they're under the gun, say, for instance, they've experienced one of the 5 Ds, and we all just did with disaster, right? That's one of the 5 Ds. Everybody's experienced that. We still are. but perhaps there's something else that comes along. Maybe there's a disability or a disagreement with a partner. Um, Maybe someone dies. Then it kind of speeds up the the process, and the timeline is shorter. So you have less time to make changes and less time to really think and ponder. So I guess that's the long answer then would be start early,
Almost in some respects as soon as you can.
right? Yeah, I don't think it's ever too early. I really don't.
Yeah. You
Mhm.
mentioned 5 Ds. You said four. For our audience, why don't you go through real quickly the five so they can have that in mind?
Sure. So the others are death, um, the death of the owner or the death of a partner, disability, someone gets sick and they can't work, or they get in an accident and they're just debilitated. Disagreement, where two partners, that happens a lot, where two partners or three partners or whatever, they want one bought out and out of the picture. And then the other one, of course, is disaster. And disaster takes many forms, right? We just experienced a pandemic disaster, but there are other forms of disaster like cybersecurity. You get hacked, ransomware, right? Um, there's a natural disaster, there's a flood or a tornado, man-made disaster, maybe war, God forbid. But those are all different forms of disaster. And I think now that business owners are going to be a little bit more open-minded to having the conversation around de-risking against the 5Ds. And there's a certain amount of resistance that business owners tend to have when it comes to exit planning, because in their mind it seems kind of final, and they would prefer to put that conversation off and just keep their head down and keep running the company. But if you can hold those two projects, those two things in constant, and have other people on the outside help you uh, through that process, it ends up being not the big bad monster that everybody thought it was.
All right. So, Julie, again, along the lines of more exit planning, exit strategies as we shift away from the book and the podcast, a couple of questions from our audience. From Eric, a longtime listener. Do you believe that owners should wait until the COVID crisis ends before selling their business?
I think that the answer to that, of course, is it depends. I think that's kind of a pat answer for those of us who are advisors, right? Um, there are going to be some situations where a business is ready to go, and sure, they should sell. They shouldn't wait, because we don't really even know when this is going to be over. Some will have to, because of some occurrence or some issue that can't be resolved without actually selling the company. And then others should wait. If they've experienced a gap or a drop in enterprise value over the last 2-3 months because of the pandemic, which I actually have a couple of clients that's happened to, unfortunately, in a big way, actually. Then, and if they have runway and they have time, then it would probably make sense for them to do what they can to close that gap and rebuild what they lost in whatever way that makes the most sense. And they would be remiss if they didn't work with outside advisors to help them figure that out, like you.
Yeah, and then also the flip side of that is the virus actually has helped some businesses, and so
Yeah,
some companies are even doing better. So it is case by case.
it's totally case by case. I actually have a couple of clients, three of my clients really are having a banner year. They're, they're busier now than they've ever been. So, and it really does depend on the industry. And I think it also depends on how well prepared the company was and the owners were. Their contingency planning was lined up. They had a good handle on their budgets and their cash flow. And so they're going to weather this a lot better than those who were caught totally off guard.
Yep. All right. So we got a couple more questions that came in. Let's start with one from Don.
Okay.
What are some different or innovative ways for companies to prepare themselves for sale?
Well, there are a lot of areas that need work, right? When you think about a business, there's finance, operations, IT, HR, sales, marketing, right? All of those areas. And any business is going to have areas where they're strong and areas where they're weak. And so my recommendation would be to focus on the weakest areas, start with a good old-fashioned SWOT analysis, and figure out where the greatest weaknesses are, because usually on the flip side of a weakness is an opportunity, right? And so focus there, and that's what I would recommend that companies do to get ready, and use outside help to do it. I think that one of the areas that suffers the most in a lot of companies is marketing. I think that marketing can tend to be disjointed. Um, the ROI is not being measured. It doesn't support sales. And many times it's the first thing that gets cut in the budget. And really, good marketing should never be cut, because marketing is really one of the only things that drives revenue in a business besides sales, right? Marketing should support sales. Sales drives revenue. Therefore, why would we cut anything that has any power over our ability to be able to grow and be more profitable? So,
I think I need you out there evangelizing that, because no question, folks have cut back on their marketing. In fact, we've talked about it a couple of times here on Club E Digital, which is the digital ad costs are down about 50% because the demand has dried up. And so it's actually a great time to do digital marketing right now.
yes, it is. Absolutely.
So a couple more questions. And there's kind of two parts of this one. So you've worked with a lot of owners over the years. A, what's the most common mistake you see them make? And then B, what was the most difficult situation that you had to work through?
Okay, boy. So, common mistake, I think, aside from having marketing be disjointed and something that's kind of ad hoc, and not effective, and being cut, that tends to be a problem. But another is that many business owners don't really focus enough on the future. They're not looking at the horizon like they should be. They have their head down, they're working hard, they're focused on the day to day, running their companies as they should be, right? It's really difficult to do both. And some business owners are better than others at being able to delegate and think about the future and plan for the future and actually have a plan. I can't even tell you of a client I've had recently in the last few years who's actually even had a written plan. So having a plan is everything. And do they change? Of course they do. But you still got to have one. You don't just get in the car and decide to drive to Atlanta and not have a idea of how you're going to get there, because that's a long drive. You want to try to have an idea of how you're going to get to Atlanta. You might have a detour, might have to, a road's out, and the bridge is out or whatever. You got to figure out a different way, and you will. But you still have to have some idea of how you're going to get there. So I think that that's one thing that's missing a lot, right? One of the biggest mistakes.
Yep.
And then the
Difficult.
one of the most difficult. This was several years ago, and it was a family-owned business, several siblings who owned the company, and they did not get along at all. And it was really tough for us to move forward. And they refused to work with a family business psychologist. They needed it, but they didn't want to spend the money. And so I continued to work with them for a couple of years to try to get them to move forward with strategy and implementation and growth and defining roles, which is one thing that's really missing a lot in family business. It's very murky when it comes to defining roles. So that was the most difficult one. I had to drop working with them. I got tired of the door slamming. It was a tough one. Yeah.
Well, and then the dynamics of most family business, I'm sure, just amps up the complexity and challenge. So
By nature.
yeah, in some respects, just by nature, it's more challenging. So we got another question here from Vita. Women owners receive less than men in venture funding when starting businesses. Do women receive less than men owners when exiting their business?
Not if they have the right advisors. Shouldn't matter at all. Yeah. And you're generally speaking, you're not going to your liquidity event will be a little bit less if you sell internally versus externally. Generally, not always, but generally. But it shouldn't make any difference. You just have to have really good advisors that know what they're doing and can negotiate well and help you prepare well in advance of the liquidity event. Don't wait until after to call upon your tax advisors and wealth managers. It's got to happen well in advance.
So, shifting gears a little bit, another question, but it's post exit from Don, again, longtime listener. What are some best practices and first steps for once a business has been purchased?
hmm That's a really good question. I would say to take it through the same steps that you would if you were starting up, or um, if you acquired a business, right? Your strategic plan needs to be updated and revised. Integrating a couple of different companies together can be challenging. Many integrations fail because they don't have a good plan in place for making it happen. Well, a lot of times they'll focus on the numbers side of it, but they're not really focused on or thinking about the culture side, or integrating systems and processes and software and departments and products and services don't always mesh well together. Locations are indifferent. I mean, there's so much to consider, right? So having a really good plan before that happens first. And then secondly, working with a good team to help with the integration. I think that your leadership is going to be overwhelmed anyway, getting to know the people and the culture of the other company. So making them be a part of all of the integration process is really not fair. I mean, they have to do some things, right? There's some projects they have to be involved in, but they really shouldn't be leading the charge. They should have an outside company to come in and help with these two companies coming together. And that's you'll set yourself up for success a lot better that way.
Okay. A reminder for anybody who'd like to put their name into a drawing for Julie's book, as well as an opportunity to ask questions. Just go to the comment field, ask your question, or do hashtag poised for growth. Had a number of questions here. It's been fun to share those with you. So going opposite of mistakes or challenges or difficult clients, I'm sure you've also been inspired by some of your clients as well. What situation or situations come to mind when you think about the things that have been most impactful to you that you've worked on?
Well, first of all, I don't think that I'd even have, well, I know I wouldn't even have a book to write if I wouldn't have had the work from my clients. So I have a very deep commitment to privately held business in our community and in our country. And, privately held companies are the ones that keep us all going. And so, I'm thankful that I've had those clients that I could tell their stories, that who employed me, and that I could help make a difference for. But there are always a few, that stand out. And there's one that was recent from about a year ago. I was doing a speaking engagement for University of St. Thomas Family Business Center, and they were in the audience. And then after our presentation was over, they waited for me and we talked. And one thing led to another, and we decided to work together. They were a family business. Didn't know if they had a successor in their son or daughter or not. And during our process of working together, determined that they didn't. But they were running the EOS method, entrepreneurial operating system. And so they had done a lot of things right. We worked on a few things with leadership, changed some things around. But for the most part, the company was really well oiled, and they mostly needed me to help them with planning their transition. And so as we were working together, the phone rang and a competitor was calling. And, usually when a competitor calls, you just kind of go, I don't know if I want to talk to them, right? So you have to really decide what competitors you would be willing to sell to and which ones you wouldn't. That's one thing you can do. And this particular competitor was of interest to them. And so they were smart about it because we planned that could happen, right? We knew that their industry was being consolidated. I said, well, you don't ever want to represent yourself in a conversation like that. So tell them very little, and then have a conversation with your attorney and have your attorney talk to their attorney, which is what they did. So we didn't need an investment banker for this situation. We kind of went down the road and determined that, yes, this was a legitimate solicitation. And they had an LOI done and due diligence completed in 4 months. closed in less than 5 months, from start to finish. It was amazing. They got a cash deal, no earnout. They got more for their business than what they thought they were going to get. And so that inspired me a lot, not only because their outcome was so great, but that they had assembled such a good team of advisors. I was the last one in. Many times I'm the first one in, but for this particular situation, I was the last one in. And all of the folks they had on their team, their attorney, their wealth manager, their CPA firm, they all knew each other. They had been communicating with each other through, however long the owners had retained them. They were good at communicating with me. We worked as a team. There wasn't any dissonance. I mean, it was just really great. I mean, that's the ideal situation. So that's the one that resonates with me the most. Yeah.
Well, they're all supposed to work that way, right?
It would be awesome if they did. That's what we work towards, though, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So again, a reminder to hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. It helps us provide good content for you, and allows us to stay in touch with upcoming events. All right. So Julie, as we kind of aim to the finish here, if you look at kind of what we've covered today, we did the book, we did the podcast, we did exit planning and strategies. If you were to try to sum it up and leave the audience with kind of a closing thought or one main thing that they can take away, what would that be?
Find and work with good advisors. Good, competent advisors. You don't want to leave money on the table. And for advisors, go the extra mile, especially now. I think that trust is paramount right now. I think a lot of people are really struggling with trusting anyone or anything in a lot of ways, just because of what's been going on. And so the more we can do for our clients, go the extra mile, help them out, use the book as a lead-in. Even if they're far out from exit planning, it really will help you to help foster that conversation, to help them safeguard and protect the asset so that they can transfer it and have a really good outcome. And you can't do that without good advisors. So.
And we've done some of that with the joint events that you mentioned earlier between the Exit Planning Institute and Club E. So I know that you and I have worked hard to provide that opportunity for folks.
Mm-hmm. It's the name of the game.
All right. So one last question, kind of a philosophical thing, more from a personal standpoint. If you look back on your career and you say, hey, learned a lot of very important lessons, but what might stand out the most as something that you know now that you wish you would have learned sooner?
I guess I got to go back to working with really good, competent advisors. I didn't have, during all those years, I look back on it now, and I didn't realize it then, right? It's that whole realm of what you don't know that you don't know. And I really didn't realize that I didn't have a good team of advisors. I had advisors, but they didn't work together, and they didn't really help me as much as what they should have. And I didn't even realize it then, right? So I guess that would be it. And then having someone that is a mentor, accountability partner, your accounting firm, your attorney, they're not really your banker. They're really not that person. You'd have to have someone separate that coaches you, that stands by you, that helps you think outside the box differently. Outside perspective is everything. I didn't have that either. Wish I would have.
All right. Well, but now you can bring it to the clients and
absolutely. Yeah, we still had a good run. It just would have been so much better if I would have had good help.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you again, Julie, for participating. It's fun to have you. We've done a number of things in the past. Look forward to doing more in the future.
Thank you.
Yeah. And if somebody wanted to reach out to you, give your contact info again.
Julie@keystrategies.com or keystrategies.com. And then phone number is 763-350-5563.
Great. Well, again, thank you very much for participating, Julie. Look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thanks so much, Rick. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy the long weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.